Welcome to our 10th ever Art Slides lecture. This is also our final Art Slides lecture, and at just 3 slides, it also happens to be the shortest. Normally, there would be one more set of slides covering Romanesque and Gothic art, but it was cut because of the shortened semester. So here we are, one last lecture for Art Slides. Today's topic, as you can read, is Islamic art. Now, when you think of Islam, your mind probably associates it more closely with the Middle East than with anything Western. And this would be largely true. It grew out of the Middle East and portions of Northern Africa and has primarily stayed there. In part, today's lecture is a continuation of Friday's material, in which we step away from the westward movement of civilization to briefly look back to the East. But it is important to note, as we will today, that Islam is not confined to the East and does indeed have an impact on modern Western civilization. As you will see in later units of humanities, Christianity will come into contact with Islam quite often, and the results are often quite destructive. And that adjective is not solely aimed at the actions of Muslims, but of Christians also. As we will see time and time again, just because people say they're Christians doesn't mean they act like it. So as we learn just a little about Islam this week, I encourage you to keep an open mind to seeing this religion and its followers in a light that is perhaps different than the dominant American view. As you will hear from Dr. Farmer this week, Islam was a religion that began in the Arabian cities of Mecca and Medina. During the 7th century CE, rulers in Arabia used the religion as a uniting force, and their armies began to overtake surrounding areas. We already had a little glimpse of this in the conversion of Hagia Sophia from a church to a mosque. Another example of the spread of Islam is the Dome of the Rock, also known as the Mosque of Omar in Jerusalem. Typically, from a Western Christian perspective, we see Jerusalem primarily as a site of Jewish faith, but it is also an important place to Muslims. This building is a shrine built on the Temple Mount in Jerusalem, where Herod's temple used to sit. It was commissioned by Abd al-Malik, an Umayyad caliph of the Islamic Empire. He wanted the building to be so dazzling as to distract people from Christian buildings in the city. It is a centrally planned octagon, and it synthesizes elements of Byzantine, Persian, and Middle Eastern styles. Its exterior is faced with marble and intricate mosaics, and its most prominent feature is, of course, its gilded dome. Inside, the decorations are similarly extravagant. But the floor in the center of the dome is bare, revealing the rocky ground on which the building rests. The rocky area is known as the foundation stone and is said to be the place where the Prophet Muhammad ascended into heaven. Our next example is the Great Mosque in Cordoba, Spain. Muslims ruled in Spain from about 711 to 1492 CE, although their grasp was quite weak by the end. This mosque is one of their greatest remaining examples of architecture. Construction on the building began around 786 CE and took nearly 2 centuries to complete. In the 13th century, Christians regained control of Cordoba and converted the mosque into a cathedral. While they made changes, enough of the original structure remains to appreciate its distinctly Islamic style. Most notable are the double arches you see here. The pillars on which the arches sit are only about 10 feet tall. This meant that a single arch would result in a relatively low ceiling. To raise the ceiling and thereby let in more light, the architects added a unique double arch. This feature was maintained in subsequent additions to the building. And our last slide is another area of the Great Mosque in Cordoba. This is the dome of the mosque's Mirab. The Mirab was a private space reserved for the caliph and his retinue. This one consists of 3 domed chambers, all interconnected by triple-tiered arches. The domes are decorated with unique mosaics on gold backgrounds. One interesting feature of the Mirab is that it is always placed in the direction toward which Muslims are meant to pray. You may recall that some Jews choose to pray facing east out of the belief that Jesus will return from the east. Similarly, Muslims always pray while facing Mecca, the city in which their religion was established, in the location of the Kaaba, which they believe to be the holiest site on earth.